Captain Elias Voss stepped off the transport shuttle onto a desolate moon outpost called Epsilon 7. His boots crunched against the rocky surface as he took in his surroundings. The air was thin, recycled through the station's filtration systems, and carried a faint metallic temps. Towering steel structures loomed around him, their surfaces scarred from years of exposure to harsh winds and abrasive sandstorms. It wasn't much to look at, just another forgotten corner of the galaxy. But it would be home for now. Elias adjusted his helmet visor and glanced up at the sky. Two pale suns hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. He sighed inwardly. This place felt more like exile than assignment. Humanity's presence here was minimal, barely noticeable compared to the sprawling empires of other species scattered throughout the stars. To most aliens, humans were still seen as reckless newcomers who barely understood how to navigate space. They had earned a reputation for being stubborn, overly ambitious, and prone to making mistakes. Commander Jara greeted him near the docking bay. She was a Calithiona, tall, reptilian-like alien with shimmering green scales that reflected the dim light of the station's artificial suns. Her sharp eyes studied him intently, her expression unreadable. "Welcome, Captain Voss," she said in a voice that sounded both melodic and cold. "You've arrived just in time." "Just in time for what?" Elias asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. He didn't trust the Calethian. They always seemed to have hidden agendas. Jara gestured for him to follow her into the main facility. As they walked, she explained the situation. "Your mission is simple, or so we hope. You are to explore an uncharted sector beyond this system. There have been reports of strange energy readings emanating from the area. We suspect it might be linked to ancient technology left behind by a long-extinct civilization." Elias frowned. "And why wasn't I briefed about this before arriving?" "Because secrecy is paramount," Jara replied without hesitation. "If word got out, every scavenger and opportunist in the galaxy would descend upon us. This discovery could shift the balance of power among the species." And frankly, her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. We wanted to see if humanity could handle such responsibility." The comment stung, but Elias kept his composure. He knew what she meant. Humans weren't exactly respected in interstellar circles. Most alien races viewed them as brash and unpredictable, too eager to prove themselves despite their lack of experience. But deep down, Elias resented being underestimated. He'd worked hard to earn his rank, and he wasn't about to let some overconfident alien commander dismiss him when they reached the briefing room. Jara stopped abruptly and turned to face him. "There's one more detail you should know." Her tone softened slightly, though her expression remained guarded. "You won't be going alone. We've assigned you a companion for this mission." Elias raised an eyebrow. "A companion? What kind of companion?" Before Jara could answer, the door slid open, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. She was unlike anyone or anything Elias had ever seen. Her skin glowed faintly with an iridescent hue, shifting colors like sunlight dancing on water. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, filled with intelligence and curiosity. Long tendrils framed her face, resembling hair but moving with a life of their own. She wore a sleek suit that seemed to blend seamlessly with her body, its design both functional and elegant. "This is Lyra," Jara introduced. "She's a member of the Zenari race, one of the oldest and most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. She accompanied you on your mission." Elias stared at Lyra, momentarily speechless. He hadn't expected this, not at all. Working alongside an alien, especially one from a species known for their superior intellect and disdain for lesser beings. Lyra stepped forward, her movements graceful, yet deliberate. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Captain Voss," she said, her voice soft but clear. Unlike Jara's icy demeanor, Lyra's tone carried warmth and perhaps even a hint of amusement. Elias cleared his throat, forcing himself to focus. "Why me?" he asked finally, looking between Lyra and Jara. "Why pair me with someone like her?" Jara crossed her arms, her scales catching the light as she shifted her weight. "Because this mission requires collaboration. Your human ingenuity combined with Lyra's knowledge may give us the edge we need. Besides," a faint smirk tugged at the corners of her mouth. "If you succeed, it will show everyone, including yourselves, that humanity has potential." After all, the words hit Elias harder than he cared to admit. Potential, that's all they saw when they looked at him, at humanity. Not strength, not capability, but mere potential. For a brief moment, anger flared within him, but he quickly pushed it aside. He couldn't afford to let emotions cloud his judgment, not now. As Lyra extended a hand toward him, Elias hesitated only briefly before shaking it. Her touch was cool but gentle, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to her than met the eye. "Shall we begin?" Lyra asked, tilting her head slightly. Elias nodded, though unease gnawed at the edges of his mind. Something about this entire setup felt off. Why assign him an alien partner? Why choose him for such a critical mission? And why did Lyra seem almost too eager? Little did he know, the answers to those questions would lead him down a path far stranger and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The shuttle carrying Captain Elias Voss and Lyra departed from Epsilon 7, leaving behind the jagged rocks and swirling dust storms of the outpost. Inside the cramped vessel, tension hung thick in the air like an invisible barrier between them. Elias sat stiffly in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests as he stared out the viewport at the endless expanse of stars. Across from him, Lyra remained calm, her luminous skin casting a soft glow that illuminated the dim interior of the cockpit. Elias couldn't help but glance at her occasionally, trying to make sense of this strange arrangement. He had expected hostility or at least indifference from an alien companion, especially one from the highly advanced Zanari race. But Lyra seemed almost curious about him. Her large almond-shaped eyes studied him intently whenever she thought he wasn't looking, as if she were trying to solve some puzzle. So, Elias finally broke the silence, his voice cautious. "Why did they assign you to me? Out of all the people who could have been sent on this mission?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, a gesture that reminded Elias of how animals sometimes observed humans with a mix of fascination and calculation. "I volunteered," she replied simply. "Volunteered?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "Why would you volunteer for something like this? Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the help, but I doubt your species sees missions like these as particularly prestigious." Lyra's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "You're right. Many of my kind viewed tasks involving humans as beneath them, but I see value in understanding those who are different from us." "Your species intrigues me." "Intrigues you?" Elias echoed, unsure whether to feel flattered or insulted. "What's so intriguing about humanity?" "For starters," Lyra said, leaning forward slightly, "you're unpredictable. Most civilizations follow patterns, logical, calculated paths. Humans, however, act on instinct, emotion, and creativity. You take risks others wouldn't dare. Consider. That unpredictability is both dangerous and fascinating." Elias chuckled dryly. "Dangerous is right. We tend to stumble our way through things until we figure them out or blow ourselves up trying. That's precisely what makes you unique," Lyra countered. "Your ability to adapt, to create solutions under pressure. It's rare among the species I've encountered. And yet," she paused, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly, "you often underestimate yourselves." Before Elias could respond, the shuttle shuddered violently, throwing both of them against their restraints. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, bathing the cabin in red hues. A loud alarm blared, cutting through the quiet hum of the engines. "What's happening?" Elias demanded, quickly scanning the readouts. "A gravitational anomaly," Lyra replied, already working on the controls with practiced efficiency. Her fingers moved swiftly over the console, adjusting settings and rerouting power. "It's pulling us off course." Elias frowned. Gravitational anomalies weren't uncommon in uncharted sectors, but this felt different. The readings indicated something far stronger than natural phenomena forced to precise to be random. "Do you think it's connected to whatever's causing those energy readings?" "It's possible," Lyra admitted, "but we need to stabilize the shuttle first. If we don't counteract the pull, we'll be dragged into whatever's generating it, and there's no telling what will happen then." Working together, they scrambled to regain control of the craft. Elias focused on stabilizing the thrusters, while Lyra recalibrated the navigation systems. Despite their differences, their actions complemented each other seamlessly. Elias marveled at how quickly Lyra adapted to human technology, while Lyra seemed impressed by Elias's resourcefulness under pressure. After several tense minutes, the shuttle stabilized enough for them to break free from the anomaly's grip. As the alarms faded and the shaking subsided, Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well," he muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead, "that was fun." Lyra gave him another small smile. "Not bad for a human, and not bad for an alien," Elias shot back, earning a soft laugh from Lyra. For the first time since meeting her, he felt a flicker of camaraderie, not quite trust, but perhaps the beginnings of mutual respect. As they assessed the damage, they noticed something unusual on the scanners. A massive structure loomed ahead, partially obscured by clouds of cosmic debris. It appeared to be some kind of ancient ship or maybe a station, its design unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Its surface shimmered faintly, pulsating, with the same energy signature that had drawn them here in the first place. "This must be the source of the readings," Lyra said, her voice tinged with awe. "Whatever it is, it predates even my people's records." Elias leaned closer to the viewport, squinting at the structure. Something about it felt wrong. The angles didn't align properly, and the light reflecting off its surface seemed to shift unnaturally, as though it existed slightly out of sync with reality. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" he asked quietly. "That it's best not to jump to conclusions," Lyra offered, though her tone suggested she shared his unease. "We should proceed carefully. This could be a treasure trove of knowledge." "A trap, great," Elias muttered. "Just what I signed up for." Despite his sarcasm, a spark of excitement ignited within him. This was why he joined the Interstellar program, to explore the unknown, to push boundaries, and to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. Whatever awaited them inside that mysterious structure, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't face it alone as they prepared to dock with the ancient artifact. Elias glanced at Lyra. "Let's hope your curiosity pays off for both our..." Sykes' smile widened. and for the first time, Elias saw genuine warmth in her glowing eyes. "Careful, Captain. Humans aren't the only ones capable of taking risks." With that, the shuttle approached the enigmatic structure, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. Neither of them could have predicted how much this discovery would change everything, not just for themselves, but for the entire galaxy. The airlock hissed as the shuttle docked with the ancient structure, sealing them inside what felt like a tomb from another era. Elias and Lyra stepped out cautiously, their boots landing on a metallic floor that hummed faintly beneath their weight. The interior was dimly lit by an eerie, pulsating glow emanating from the walls, themselves patterns of light shifting in waves, almost alive. It wasn't welcoming, but it wasn't hostile either. Just strange. "This place is incredible," Lyra murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She ran her fingers over the wall, tracing one of the glowing patterns. "It's not just technology, it's art, a fusion of science and expression." Elias nodded, though he couldn't fully appreciate the aesthetic. His focus was on survival. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, a primal instinct telling him they weren't alone. He glanced around, gripping the handle of his plasma rifle tightly. "Incredible or not, we need to stay sharp. Something about this feels off." Lyra turned to him, her large eyes reflecting the luminescent hues around them. "You're right, this isn't just some relic. It's active. Whatever powered this station is still functioning after all these millennia. That's unheard of." As they ventured deeper into the structure, the architecture grew more alien, hallways twisted at impossible angles, defying logic and physics. Doors opened automatically, revealing chambers filled with intricate machinery and symbols etched into every surface. Some of the symbols seemed familiar, like echoes of languages humanity had encountered before, but others were completely foreign, even to Lyra. "This must have been built by a civilization far older than mine," she said, or creeping into her tone. "But why? What purpose could this serve?" Before Elias could respond, a low vibration rippled through the station. The lights flickered erratically, casting distorted shadows across the walls. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through their chests, growing louder with each passing second. "Is that normal?" Elias asked, raising his weapon instinctively. "No," Lyra replied, her calm demeanor wavering slightly. "Nothing about this is normal." Suddenly, a holographic projection materialized in front of them. At first it was blurry, indistinct shapes forming and dissolving like smoke, but soon the image coalesced into something recognizably being humanoid in shape but elongated and translucent. Its features sharp and angular. Its eyes glowed with an intensity that made Elias take a step back. "Who or what is that?" he whispered. "I don't know," Lyra admitted, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "It doesn't match any species I've studied." The figure didn't speak, at least, not in words they could understand. Instead, it emitted a series of melodic tones, like a symphony played on unseen instruments. The sound resonated through the chamber, filling Elias's mind with fleeting images: stars collapsing, planets breaking apart, civilizations vanishing in flashes of light. "What's it doing?" Elias asked, clutching his head as the visions intensified. "It's communicating," Lyra said, her gaze fixed on the hologram, "not with language, but with emotion and memory. It's trying to show us something." Elias focused, forcing himself to pass the chaos in his mind. Slowly, the fragmented images began to form a narrative. He saw vast fleets clashing among the stars, weapons unleashing energy so destructive it tore holes in space itself, entire worlds reduced to ash, and then silence, empty voids where life once thrived. They destroyed themselves, Elias realized aloud, his voice heavy with dread. This civilization wiped itself out. The hologram shifted again, showing a new sequence, a group of beings standing together, their forms merging into a single entity. They radiated unity and purpose, their combined strengths stabilizing the fractured remnants of their world. But even that effort seemed futile in the end. The vision dissolved into darkness. Lyra looked shaken. They tried to save themselves, but it wasn't enough. They created this station as a warning, a beacon for others to learn from their mistakes. "But why us?" Elias asked, gesturing between himself and Lyra. "Why bring us here now?" Before Lyra could answer, the station trembled violently, throwing them both off balance. Alarms blared, not mechanical ones, but organic sounds like cries of distress. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving only the oppressive hum of the station's core. "We triggered something," Lyra said urgently, scrambling to her feet. "We need to find the source of the energy readings, and fast." They sprinted down the twisting corridors, following the intensifying vibrations. Along the way they encountered obstacles, doors sealed shut, platforms collapsing underfoot, and bursts of energy erupting from the walls. Each challenge forced them to rely on each other more deeply. When a collapsed bridge blocked their path, Elias used his engineering skills to rig a makeshift ramp using debris. When a burst of energy threatened to overload their suits, Lyra channeled her innate Zenari abilities to stabilize their systems. Through it all, Elias found himself marveling at Lyra's composure, and she, in turn, admired his ingenuity. Their differences became strengths rather than barriers. For the first time, Elias began to see how two vastly different species could work together, not just survive, but thrive. Finally, they reached the heart of the station, a massive chamber dominated by a glowing orb suspended in midair. Energy crackled around it, creating arcs of lightning that danced across the room. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through every cell in their bodies. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and wonder. "The source of the readings. If we can access its data, we might uncover the truth about this civilization and maybe prevent the same fate from befalling others." Elias stared at the orb, his jaw tightening. Something about it felt wrong, almost sentient. "How do we interact with it without blowing ourselves up?" Lyra hesitated, then extended her hand toward the orb. Carefully, as her fingertips brushed against the surface, the orb flared brightly, bathing the entire chamber in blinding light. Images flooded their minds again, this time clearer, more urgent. They saw glimpses of their own galaxy, teetering on the brink of conflict, species vying for dominance, resources dwindling, tensions escalating, and amidst it all a single thread of hope: humanity and the Zanari standing side by side, bridging divides no one thought possible. When the light faded, Elias and Lyra stood frozen, breathing heavily. The message was clear: the universe needed unity, cooperation, and understanding. Without it, history would repeat itself. "Well," Elias said finally, breaking the silence. "That was intense." Lyra nodded, her glowing skin pale with exhaustion. "And it's only the beginning." Outside the station, the cosmos stretched endlessly before them, vast and unknowable. But within those infinite possibilities lay a choice: to rise above division or succumb to destruction. Together, they resolved to choose the former even if it meant challenging everything they'd ever known. The chamber fell silent after the orb's dazzling display, leaving Elias and Lyra standing in stunned awe. The weight of what they had witnessed pressed down on them like a physical force. The visions weren't just warnings, they were calls to action. The ancient civilization had entrusted them with knowledge that could shape the future of the galaxy. But with that knowledge came responsibility, and neither of them was ready to bear it alone. "We can't ignore this," Lyra said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her usual composure. "If we don't act, history will repeat itself. All those lives, wasted." Elias nodded slowly, his mind racing. He clenched and unclenched his fists as he processed everything they'd seen: the destruction, the unity, the fragile hope. But how? "We're just two people. What can we possibly do against something so massive?" Lyra stepped closer to him, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "To people who now understand the stakes better than anyone else. To people from different worlds, working together despite our differences. That's where change begins." Her words struck a chord deep within Elias. For years, humanity had struggled to prove its worth in a galaxy dominated by older, more advanced species. They were dismissed as reckless, naive, or worse. But here, in this alien structure, surrounded by echoes of an extinct civilization, Elias realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or military might. It was its ability to adapt, connect, and inspire others. Still, doubt lingered at the edges of his thoughts. "Even if we try, who's going to listen? Most species won't take us seriously, and your own kind, they'll probably think we're overstepping." Lyra tilted her head thoughtfully. "Then we'll make them listen. Together, my people may underestimate you, but they trust me. If I vouch for humanity, if I show them what you're capable of, they'll have no choice but to reconsider." Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's quite the gamble. Are you sure you want to risk burning bridges with your own species?" Lyra smiled faintly, though there was steel behind her expression. "Sometimes risks are necessary. Besides," she gestured toward the glowing orb, which still pulsed faintly in the center of the chamber. "This is bigger than either of us, bigger than any one species. If we fail, everyone loses." Before Elias could respond, the station shuddered violently. Again, this time the vibrations were stronger, more erratic. A low groan echoed through the walls, followed by the sound of metal straining under immense pressure. Sparks erupted from panels along the ceiling, showering the floor with fiery embers. "What's happening?" Elias shouted over the noise, raising his arms to shield his face. "The core," Lyra yelled back, pointing toward the orb. Its glow had intensified, shifting from a soft luminescence to a blinding radiance. Waves of energy rippled outward, distorting the air around them. "It's destabilizing. We triggered something when I touched it." Elias cursed under his breath. "Can we shut it down?" "I don't know," Lyra admitted, panic creeping into her voice for the first time. "This technology is beyond anything I've ever encountered. If we don't stabilize it soon, it could tear this entire sector apart." Elias glanced around frantically, searching for a solution. His gaze landed on a control panel embedded in the wall, a series of intricate symbols etched into its surface. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward it, pulling out his datapad to scan the interface. "Help me decode this," he called to Lyra, tapping furiously at the screen. "You're better at understanding alien languages than I am." Lyra joined him, her hands moving deftly over the controls. Together they deciphered fragments of the alien script, piecing to gather commands based on context clues. Time seemed to slow as the station quaked around them, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, Lyra let out a triumphant gasp. "I think I've got it. There's a sequence here. It looks like a failsafe mechanism, but activating it might drain all available power. Once we do this, we won't be able to access the orb's data again." Elias hesitated. The orb contained vital information about the ancient civilization, the key to preventing galactic catastrophe. Losing it would mean starting over from scratch. But staying here meant certain death for both of them, and potentially for countless others if the core exploded. "Do it," he said firmly. "We'll find another way." Lyra nodded, her resolve hardening. With a final keystroke, she initiated the failsafe sequence. The orb dimmed abruptly, its blinding light fading into a soft, steady glow. The tremor subsided and the oppressive hum receded until only silence remained. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elias exhaled sharply, sinking to his knees. In relief, that was too close. Lyra knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You saved us, both of us." "No," Elias corrected, meeting her gaze. "We saved each other. Neither of us could have done it alone." As they sat there catching their breath, Elias felt a shift not just in himself, but in the dynamic between them. They had started this mission as strangers, representatives of species divided by prejudice and misunderstanding. Now, they were partners, bound by shared purpose and mutual respect. In that moment, Elias realized something profound. Humanity's greatest asset wasn't its individual brilliance, it was its capacity to build bridges, even in the most unlikely places. When they finally stood and prepared to leave the chamber, Elias paused to look back at the orb one last time. Though its light was dimmer now, it still pulsed faintly, as if alive. He didn't know what lay ahead for them or whether they'd succeed in their mission. But he knew one thing for certain: they had taken the first step toward changing the galaxy. And that step began with trust. Outside the station, the stars shimmered brightly against the endless void, indifferent yet full of possibility. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying them back toward Epsilon 7, Elias couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, he believed they might actually stand a chance. Together, the shuttle ride back to Epsilon 7 was quiet. But the silence between Elias and Lyra wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was charged with unspoken thoughts, shared determination, and the weight of what they had just experienced inside the ancient station. They both knew that their discovery would change everything if they could convince others to listen. As they approached the outpost, the jagged rocks and swirling dust storms came into view once again. The desolate landscape felt smaller now, less oppressive, as if its insignificance mirrored humanity's current standing in the galaxy. But Elias refused to let that discourage him. If anything, it fueled his resolve. This forgotten corner of the universe was about to become the epicenter of something far greater. When they docked and stepped out onto the platform, Commander Jarrah was waiting for them. Her shimmering scales glinted under the artificial sunlight, her expression unreadable as always. She crossed her arms and fixed them with a piercing gaze. "Report," she demanded, her voice sharp. Elias took a deep breath before speaking. "We found the source of the energy readings, an ancient structure built by a long-extinct civilization. It contained vital information, warnings about the dangers of division and conflict among species." Jarrah raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in her tone. "Warnings from a dead race. How does this concern us?" "It concerns everyone," Lyra interjected, stepping forward. Her glowing skin seemed brighter than usual, as though powered by conviction. "Their downfall mirrors the tensions we see today across the galaxy. If we don't act, history will repeat itself. We've been given a chance to prevent catastrophe, to unite instead of divide." Jarrah studied Lyra for a moment, then turned her attention to Elias. "And you agree with this assessment?" "I do," Elias said firmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "This isn't just some relic or curiosity. It's a message meant for all of us. Humanity may not have centuries of interstellar experience like your people, but we understand survival, and right now, survival means cooperation." For a brief moment, Jarrah looked almost impressed, or perhaps merely intrigued. Then her expression hardened again. "Even if I believed you, convincing the Intergalactic Council won't be easy. Humans are seen as reckless upstarts, incapable of handling such responsibility. That's why we're asking for your help," Lyra said earnestly. "You hold influence among the Caluthians. If you support us, others might follow." Jarrah hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she sighed and uncrossed her arms. "Very well. I'll arrange a transmission to the Council, but don't expect miracles. Many will dismiss your claims outright." "Then we'll make them listen," Elias replied, his voice steady. "We'll show them the truth, no matter how long it takes." Over the next few days, Elias and Lyra worked tirelessly to compile evidence from their mission. They reviewed every scan, recording, and data fragment they had gathered from the ancient station. The holographic visions were particularly compelling proof that the extinct civilization had intentionally left behind a warning for future generations. Yet, even with all the evidence in hand, they knew presenting it wouldn't be enough. They needed allies. Lyra reached out to members of her own species, leveraging her reputation as a respected Zinari scientist. To her surprise, several agreed to hear their case, not because they trusted humanity, but because they trusted her. Meanwhile, Elias focused on rallying human personnel stationed at Epsilon 7, though skeptical at first. Many warmed to his impassioned speeches about unity and hope. "You really think this can work?" asked Lieutenant Mara, one of the younger officers who had initially dismissed Elias as overly idealistic. "We don't have a choice," Elias responded, his eyes blazing with determination. "If we give up now, we're no better than the species who destroyed themselves millennia ago. We owe it to ourselves and to everyone else to try." Word spread quickly through the outpost, drawing attention from unexpected quarters. A group of Trilithian traders passing through Epsilon 7 heard rumors of their efforts and offered assistance. Even a delegation of Vaynok diplomats, known for their neutrality, expressed cautious interest in learning more, but not everyone was supportive. Skeptics abounded, especially among the Calathians and other dominant species. Some accused Elias and Lyra of exaggerating their findings, while others dismissed the entire mission as a waste of resources. Tensions escalated when news of the plans leaked to scavenger factions, opportunistic groups eager to exploit the ancient station for profit. One evening, as Elias and Lyra prepared for the upcoming council meeting, they received an urgent alert. A fleet of scavenger ships had entered the sector, heading straight for the ancient structure. Their intentions were clear: plunder whatever technology remained, regardless of the consequences. "We can't let them get there," Lyra said urgently, pacing the command center. "If they tamper with the core, it could destabilize the entire region." Elias clenched his fists, frustration boiling within him. "We need reinforcements, but there's no time to wait for backup. We'll have to stop them ourselves." Lyra stopped pacing and looked at him, her large eyes filled with resolve. "Then we go together." The journey back to the ancient station felt shorter this time, urgency propelling them forward. As they approached, the scavenger fleet loomed ominously in the distance, a swarm of battered ships bristling with weapons. Elias piloted the shuttle skillfully, weaving through asteroids to avoid detection until they were close enough to act. "This is insane," he muttered, gripping the controls tightly. "We're outnumbered 10 to 1. Since when has that ever stopped you?" Lyra asked, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Elias chuckled despite himself. "Fair point. They devised a plan on the fly, combining human ingenuity with Zinari precision. Using the shuttle's limited arsenal, they targeted key systems on the scavenger ships, disabling engines and communications without causing significant harm. At the same time, Lyra used her advanced tech to hack into their systems, planting false signals that made the scavengers turn on each other. It was risky, chaotic, and utterly exhausting, but it worked. By the time reinforcements arrived from Epsilon 7, the scavenger fleet had scattered, leaving the ancient station untouched. That is, Elias and Lyra stood outside the structure once more, watching the last of the scavenger ships retreat into the void. Elias felt a surge of pride, not just in their victory, but in what it represented. Against overwhelming odds, two individuals from vastly different worlds had come together to protect something greater than themselves. "They're starting to see it," Lyra said softly, breaking the silence. "Your courage, your creativity, it's changing minds." Elias nodded, gazing up at the stars. "Let's hope it's enough." The stage was set for the final battle, not with weapons, but with words. The galaxy awaited their plea for unity, and failure was not an option. The intergalactic council chamber was a grand cavernous space filled with tiered seating that spiraled upward like the rings of a massive tree. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated sections, each marked by symbols and banners unique to their civilizations. At the center of the room stood a circular platform where petitions were presented, a stage designed for speeches meant to sway hearts and minds. Today it belonged to Captain Elias Voss and Lyra. Elias adjusted his uniform nervously as he stepped onto the platform, Lyra at his side. Their arrival had already drawn murmurs throughout the chamber, some curious, others dismissive. To many of the council members, humanity's presence here was an affront, a reminder of how far they still had to go to earn respect. But Elias didn't care about proving himself anymore. This wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Lyra placed a reassuring hand on his arm before stepping forward first. Her glowing skin cast soft light across the podium as she addressed the assembled delegates. "Esteemed representatives," she began, her voice steady but resonant, commanding attention without demanding it. "What I am about to share concerns not just one species, but all life in this galaxy." She activated the holographic projector embedded in the podium. Instantly, images of the ancient station appeared above them, its shimmering walls, intricate designs, and pulsating energy core. Then came the visions, the extinct civilization collapsing under the weight of its own divisions, followed by glimpses of hope as individuals united to rebuild what they could. Finally, the message, the warning that echoed through time. urging future generations to learn from their mistakes. This is no myth or legend, Lyra continued. It is evidence left behind by a race that once thrived among the stars, only to destroy itself through greed, fear, and mistrust. Their fate mirrors the fractures we see today, the same divisions threatening to tear our galaxy apart. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some leaned forward, intrigued. Others exchanged skeptical glances. A Calathian representative near the front raised a scaled hand. And why should we believe you? How do we know this isn't some fabricated story to elevate humanity's status? Elias stepped forward, meeting the Calathian's gaze head-on. Because it's true, and because ignoring it won't make it go away. He gestured toward the holograms still hovering above them. These aren't just images, proof that cooperation saved them for a time, and proof that failure to sustain it doomed them forever. He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, with quiet intensity, he added, "We've seen what happens when species turn against one another. Wars fought over resources. Entire planets reduced to ash. You all know this, and you've lived it. But imagine if we chose a different path. Imagine if we worked together and not out of obligation, but because it's the only way to ensure our survival." The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, Elias wondered if he'd overstepped, if his plea would fall flat. Then, unexpectedly, a Trilithian trader spoke up. "You speak boldly, human, yet your actions align with your words. We saw how you defended the ancient structure against scavengers. That took courage and unity." A Vaynok diplomat nodded. "In agreement, indeed. Perhaps there is wisdom in listening further. After all, even the smallest voices can carry great truths." Encouraged by these responses, Lyra pressed on. "This isn't about choosing sides, it's about finding common ground. Our differences are strengths, not weaknesses. Together we can bridge divides, solve problems, and create something greater than any one species alone." As she spoke, Elias noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. The skepticism that had dominated earlier began to soften. More representatives started nodding, whispering among themselves. Even Commander Jara, seated high in the Calathian section, gave a slight incline of her head, a gesture of approval. So faint most might have missed it, but not everyone was convinced. A Zyran ambassador rose abruptly, his insectoid frame towering over the others. "Enough of this idealism," he snapped, his voice harsh and grating. "Survival requires power, not hand-holding. If humanity wishes to prove itself, let them demonstrate their worth not through words, but action." The chamber erupted into debate, voices rising in disagreement. Elias felt frustration bubbling within him, but Lyra placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Let me handle this," she whispered. Turning back to the crowd, Lyra's expression hardened, her normally serene demeanor giving way to determination. "Very well," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "If action is what you seek, then action you shall have. My people will assist in studying the ancient technology further, sharing its secrets with all who wish to learn. Humanity will provide logistical support, using their ingenuity to adapt its lessons for practical use. Together, we will build a coalition dedicated to preserving peace, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary." Her declaration silenced the chamber once more. Slowly, applause began to ripple through the tiers, starting with the Trilithians and spreading outward until the entire room resounded with approval. Even the Zyran ambassador sank back into his seat, unable to argue against such a unified front. When the session adjourned, Elias and Lyra stood side by side, watching as delegates approached them to offer congratulations, questions, and tentative alliances. It wasn't victory yet, not fully, but it was a start. As they left the chamber, Elias glanced at Lyra, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We did it," he said softly. "We actually got them to listen." Lyra smiled, her glow brighter than ever. "No, you did it. Your passion inspired them. Remember, Elias, humanity's greatest strength lies not in weapons or wealth, but in its ability to inspire others." For the first time since arriving at Epsilon 7, Elias felt truly hopeful. The galaxy wasn't perfect, and challenges still lay ahead. But together with Lyra, with humanity, with every species willing to join them, they had taken the first step toward a brighter future. And sometimes, the first step was all it took to change everything. Months passed after the historic council meeting, and the galaxy began to shift in ways no one could have predicted. The coalition Elias and Lyra had sparked grew steadily, drawing in representatives from dozens of species who were eager or at least willing to work together. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements still flared, old prejudices lingered, and progress, we often felt, painfully slow. But for the first time in centuries, there was hope, a fragile, flickering flame that refused to be extinguished. Elias stood on the observation deck of Epsilon 7, gazing out at the stars. The outpost had transformed since his arrival. Once a desolate corner of the universe where humanity was quietly exiled, it now buzzed with activity. Scientists, diplomats, engineers, and explorers from across the galaxy worked side by side, analyzing data from the ancient station, sharing knowledge, and forging new alliances. Humanity's role had shifted too from underestimated newcomers to active participants in shaping the future. Lyra joined him, her glowing skin casting a soft light over the dimly lit room. She leaned against the railing beside him, her large eyes reflecting the distant suns. "It's strange," she said thoughtfully, breaking the silence. "When I volunteered for this mission, I never imagined it would lead here." "Neither did I," Elias admitted with a smile. He turned to look at her, marveling at how much had changed not just in the galaxy, but between them. "I came here thinking I'd prove something to everyone else. Instead, I ended up learning more about myself and about us." Lyra tilted her head slightly, curiosity sparking in her expression. "Us, humans and Zanari," Elias clarified. "Allies, partners, whatever you want to call it. We're stronger together than we ever were apart." Her lips curved into a small, warm smile. "You've always been stronger than you realized, Elias. You just needed someone to remind you." They stood there for a while longer, watching the cosmos stretched endlessly before them. The vastness of space was humbling, yet somehow comforting. It reminded Elias of how small they all were in the grand scheme of things, and how incredible it was that they had found a way to connect despite their differences. Later that evening, Elias attended a ceremony held in the newly constructed Unity Hall, a symbol of the Coalition's growing influence. Representatives from nearly every species involved gathered to celebrate milestones achieved and plans for the future. The hall itself was a masterpiece of collaboration, its walls adorned with designs inspired by countless cultures, its architecture blending functionality with artistry. Commander Jera approached Elias during the event, her scales shimmering under the chandelier's glow. For once, her usual stern demeanor softened into something resembling respect. "Captain Voss," she said, inclining her head slightly, "your efforts have not gone unnoticed. Perhaps humanity is ready to take its place among the stars after all." Elias returned the gesture, bowing slightly. "Thank you, Commander. That means more than you know." As the night wore on, speeches were given, stories shared, and promises made. But it was the final moment of the ceremony that left the deepest impression. A holographic projection of the ancient orb appeared above the crowd, its light pulsing gently as if alive. Around it floated images of the extinct civilization, their struggles, their unity, their ultimate downfall. Then, slowly, the hologram shifted to show scenes from the present, humans working alongside aliens, breakthroughs in technology, acts of kindness and cooperation. The message was clear: the past didn't have to dictate the future. The choice was theirs. When the lights dimmed again, signaling the end of the ceremony, Elias stepped outside onto a balcony overlooking the outpost. Lyra joined him moments later, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea, one for each of them. She handed him one, her tendrils swaying softly in the cool breeze. "To the future," she said, raising her cup. Elias clinked his against hers, smiling. "To unity." They sipped their drinks in companionable silence, the weight of what they'd accomplished settling over them like a comforting blanket. The road ahead would still be challenging, full of obstacles neither of them could foresee. But they faced it together, armed with determination, trust, and an unshakable belief in the power of connection. As Elias looked out at the stars once more, he thought about how far they'd come. From a desolate moon outpost to the heart of a galactic movement, humanity had proven its worth not through force or domination, but through empathy, creativity, and resilience. And though the journey was far from over, Elias knew one thing for certain. In a universe so vast and unpredictable, the greatest strength lay not in individual brilliance, but in the bonds forged between those brave enough to reach across divides. Above them, the stars burned brightly, indifferent yet eternal. They were witnesses to humanity's rise, to the fragile hope spreading through the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic ocean. Somewhere among those infinite points of light, the ancient civilization's legacy lived on, not as a warning, but as a promise. And as long as beings like Elias and Lyra dared to dream, that promise would endure.